So let's see if I can get this thing going. I'm going to talk about terrain-less procedural content generation with Lua. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Tash, which is not here at the moment, but he convinced me to do 2 talks instead of 1 on this workshop. So basically, if everything goes okay and you like the presentation, it's because I did a great job. If you don't like it, you can blame him. Okay? That's the social contract we are operating under. Yeah. Okay? So it's going to have these parts in introduction. I'm going to talk about the L systems quite a lot. That's going to be the meat of the presentation. Then I'll mention other applications of procedural content generation and a conclusion, which will be longer or shorter depending on the time we have left. So let's go with the intro. This is a talk about Lua, but it's also a talk about procedural content generation. And since it's such a big mouthful, I'm going to say PCG from now on. It's much easier to pronounce. And the talk is going to be mainly about PCG. It's not going to be super technical, so you can relax. If you lose your train of thought and then come back, you will be fine. It's going to have nice graphics and very few lines of code. So enjoy. And it's actually a child-friendly talk. I saw some child. If they want to come, it's fine. So PCG has been related with video game maps and terrains and levels from the beginning, or from its beginning, at least on the video game medium, which is quite, as you can imagine, quite related with Lua. This was one of the first maps I saw inside a video game, because, well, there have been others, but this was my first. This is Zelda, A Link to the Past, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and before this, all the game maps I had ever used looked like this. So this is, in case you cannot notice, it's hand-drawn. This is actually a very good map because it has colors and different areas correctly delimited. Usually I just took very ugly notes on a notepad or something like that. So yes, when I saw this, I was impressed. I was even more impressed when I realized at some point in the game, this is a spoiler of a 20-something-year-old game, there was another map that you opened at some point. This is called the Dark World, and it had its own enemies, its own zones, even its own dungeons. And I thought this was quite cool. I couldn't verbalize it, but you have to take into account that these cartridges, this was the solid support that we used before we had apps and stuff like that. They actually went inside here. This is the American version of the Super Nintendo, which is much clunkier than the European or Japanese one. It's much more elegant, but it's okay. You put your cartridge here. It didn't work, then you have to blow it up, put it back in, and then it worked. That's how it works. One interesting fact is that the biggest cartridge you could get on the Super Nintendo was 48 megabits. Bits. If you put it in bytes, 6 megabytes. So they actually managed to cram a lot of data. Imagine all those maps I have just shown you with all those enemies, rules and sound and dungeons and everything in 6 megabytes. Some of the images I'm using on this presentation are bigger than this. So it was quite a feat. And it's already pointing to one of the problems we are trying to resolve here, which is hardware limitations. This trend of having maps in video games continued, and with time, those maps got bigger. This is an industry where bigger means better all the time. It means more sales, so there's a strong push for bigger, bigger, and bigger every time. One of the maps here is not correctly put on scale, but that doesn't bring the point down. This was done several years ago. They actually made an update version of this where you see the biggest map on this screen is actually the smallest one on this. So it has continued increasing. And another different problem emerged from this trend. The problem is, sorry, this is not very well. Okay. The problem is this person, this young lady. It's what we call the game artist or game designer, depending on where you are. And she is basically, or she was basically in charge of creating all this content that we have seen. This is in a way a hardware problem too, because you notice she's using a pen to design stuff. She can only move her hand so fast. So another interesting problem about space is that when it increases quadratically. But adding resources, adding people, like this woman, to a team only increases linearly. So when the maps get so big, there is a point where basically you cannot scale anymore by adding more people. You need other ways of doing stuff. So what the video game companies had, in addition to artists, were programmers. And the programmers started doing things like this. This is a tool that the artists used, and they would ask programmers, hey, can you give me a function to put 1,000 trees on a single click? And they did this. Then, however, the managers who were quite worried about this problem gave the next step, logical step, which is, okay, now can you actually make those pieces of water and mountains with a program instead of having an artist do that? And that's what they did. And that's basically what procedural content generation is about. You make a procedure, a program to generate content without human intervention. So this doesn't mean that artists are thrown out of the window. This means that the artists can actually concentrate on other parts of the program, while repetitive tasks are left to computers. So, yeah, there are lots of examples of these. Some of them are popular, some of them are quite niche. One of them is Minecraft, which is, or was maybe, quite popular again between younger generations. All you can see here was generated by a computer program, except maybe the textures on the sides of the cubes, and some of the houses you see at the back end. Those were probably handmade, but then the program chose where to put them. So again, it's a teamwork between artists and programmers. We have also moved away from the one map approach, and now we can find galaxies, like on No Man's Sky, where you can actually fly around between planets, land on those planets, get off your ship, and actually visit the tiny procedurally generated animals roaming around in those planets. So the scale, I can actually not show a map like I did before anymore with this game. It's just too big. Okay. So this is not the only way I could have shown you PCG. It has existed already for a while. There is a whole class of games called roguelikes. This is one example called Bro, which have been doing this since almost day one. This is a kind of game that was usually done by a single programmer with no access to a graphics artist, or with probably not a very good set of artistic capabilities. And they compensated a little bit by using programs to generate levels. The idea was actually being able to enjoy the game that you created, because you yourself as a creator didn't know what you were going to encounter. We will talk about roguelikes a bit more at the end of the talk if we have time. Anyway, moving on to the meat of the talk, L systems. L stands for Lindermeyer, probably I'm butchering the name. and that's the name of its creator. This person was a botanist, who also had mathematical inclinations, and he's quite related with turtles. So I would like you to raise your hand if you know what turtle graphics are. Okay, significant amount of people, it's cool. For the rest of you, turtle graphics are a way of programming graphic design, I would say. It's a way very useful to teach children how to program. And it basically involves a cursor that you move around by writing code. So the cursor is called a turtle. That's why you call it turtle graphics. And it has a very simple set of rules or actions that you can tell it to do. For example, move forward. And when it moves, it leaves a line. Then you can say rotate left, rotate right. And with time and experimentation, you get cool designs. So this is related with systems. Before that, however, I want to mention this tweet, which I just saw this weekend, so I couldn't really include it, but it shows the leading edge of showing children how to program with topographics. So give it a lot of you can, it's quite cool. Anyway, going back to this design, if we were going to program a Lua interface for this turtle, it looks similar to this, probably per action. So they changed that to this. F is forward, and then minus is left, and plus is right. This is kind of the standard they use. And usually, this set of actions was not expressed as a list, it was expressed as a string. In Lua, we call this rule. This rule in particular, this is a table associating letter F with this set of other actions. You can probably intuit how this is going to roll. If we add action or initial state to a set of rules, we can start procedurally generating stuff. In this case, what we will do is start with the F, then replace the F with the rule that we saw we have just above. We will have the content of the rule, then we will apply it again, and it will start growing. We will have an even increasingly long string of actions for the turtle to do. And at some point, we will have to stop. And we will have a huge string that we can pass. And then this will happen. This is the first iteration we saw already. That's the second one scaled down. Third one, and it was 4 and 5. Well, you cannot see this one, but you have to trust me. It's there. This is called the Koch curve, and it's one of the easiest fractals to produce. It has very nice properties. For example, its length is infinite once you get to infinite iterations and things like that. And it was quite easy to produce with some lines of code and some string manipulation, which is cool. In their in their book, Lindermeyer and his associate, which I'm not going to try to pronounce, they were concentrated on plants. And if you read the book, which is quite interesting, you will see that the first part of the book is describing L systems, which I haven't described completely, by the way, it was an introduction. And then how to use them. The second part of the book was how to use it for generating plants or plant-like structures. This is in 2D, and also there were some 3D pictures. It was basically applying the same principle, but with a more intelligent, capable turtle. This, however, that isn't really limited to trees. Other people have used it to generate other interesting structures. This is Graphica. It's a set, I don't know if it's more than one book, but it's a book of art generated using Mathematica in this case. But I find it quite interesting. And if you are into this kind of stuff, you can find plenty of art generated with computer and a program. This is if you take Lindermeyer's work to the extreme. It's called split tree. It's a middleware that you use. You can use in video games and also films. It was used in the recent Home film, by the way. As you can see, we have reached a point where we can generate hyper-realistic trees. It's not limited to the basic algorithms that you saw before. This, of course, is the result of many years of work. And it's like a super big image. Another mention I want to make is voxel farm. This started as a hobbyist project. Actually, there are two links because the one at the bottom is the blog of its author, of its main author. It's an engine which concentrates on generating landscapes like the one you are seeing on this picture. It's quite realistic and it's very nice, but it's also the most obvious thing to do with PCG. The part that interests me is not the mountains and the tiny trees that you see here on the rocks. It's this. It's also capable of generating high information density zones like this one, where they actually use L systems. But it's basically a set of rules to generate houses and constructions or basically anything you want. And I found this super attractive when Miguel Cepero, who is the author, started blogging about this. I was so excited because I thought, hey, Lua is a great fit for this. They actually developed a language. I'll show you in a moment. But basically, the language starts with simple primitives like a brick. Then you make a rule for making a wall. And then with that wall rule, you can generate a room or a tower. And yeah, this kind of recycling of information also, I think, it aligns very well with Lua. But I was dismayed when published that the syntax they're going to use is a custom one. Okay? This is one of the easiest examples. I'm not going to pretend I understand everything, but it's a pity because I think the Lua version would be not so much more difficult to understand. And I would really love to see Lua employed on this field for this kind of constructions. It is not. This is fake. I made it. And it's lots of work. Okay. That's basically what I wanted to say about L systems. So of course, you can explore much more. The slides have plenty of links that you can click on and follow. Now I wanted to explore other systems where PCG is used. One of them is music. And there are a couple of projects that already use Lua to generate music. One problem I have with them, not only with the ones written in Lua, but the ones in general, procedural music generation, somehow it's a bit like monads in Haskell. People who get infected by it suddenly become completely unintelligible for everyone else. Yes, this is a conceptual artist presenting, or I don't know if she's presenting or visiting a piece of art. The one in the front is actually not a real one, it's a statue. And I don't understand why she's holding a turkey. Okay, she does that, and okay. And that's a bit what happens with PCG music. It exists, but it's not for everyone. So this is what to warn you about what I'm going to do now. I'm going to play some music, which is shown as an example of what one of those engines can do. But it's peculiar. Okay? So let me play it. Let me do the sound. I don't know if I can actually, it's a new computer, but apparently the sound isn't working. Oh, This is the first part. Okay, almost done. And the finale. Okay. So I'm not trying to make fun of this. I really don't understand it. It's probably my fault. Really. Let me see if I can get out of here. There you go. There is an algorithm behind those notes that you heard. It's just something so high level that it goes over your head, mine at least. There are other examples that you can see here. Apparently you can include your own algorithms to generate stuff, but just so you know, be prepared for hearing this kind of music. There is another example which is a bit more easy to digest. This is called Moonlet, and it's a program that you use to modify music while it plays. So it's a performance act. This is also quite common. You use PCG. The sound quality is actually not very good here. I'm going to play it much longer. Anyway, you can do stuff not only as a complete piece of work that you just press a button and get a song back. You can also interact with the algorithms, and it's again not my cup of tea, but some people like this stuff, and I find it quite interesting. However, what I really want is some piece of probably complex set of rules to generate common sounding music. That's what I really would like someone to do. And I think, again, Lua would be a great place, again, a great match to do this. Okay, and now moving over to another example. You probably recognize this. This is not the famous San Francisco Bridge. It's the other one. This is the Bay Bridge. The big one, which is gray or bluish. Okay, and at night there is this show with lights that it's supposed to be different every night. So I don't exactly know how they do it, but I'm sure there is some PCG involved. Maybe, I don't know, there is a Raspberry Pi running somewhere with Lua inside, calculating these patterns that he used. So if you go for a walk tonight, just give it a look, because you're actually seeing a huge example of PCG. I also want to mention this. This is again No Man's Sky, the game I told you before with the galaxies and planets and the animals. So this is how the animals are created. It's a very, very simple algorithm. Basically, they have 6 or 7 types of animals, and then each type contains a set of body parts. And the only thing they do to generate different species is first choosing a class of animal, and then inside that class they choose a random number of body parts, like this. And then on top of that they apply texture, which is also generated procedurally. What you're seeing is one example of several examples of one of the classes. But when you add up 7 different classes that won't appear on every planet, and you are just playing, not paying attention, your mind doesn't register that there are very common similarities between them. So at some point, combinatory plays against your human mind, because we are limited. Finally, well, almost finally, I wanted to mention other more extreme ways of doing PCG. This is a way of modeling minds, personalities. The link at the bottom is a link to Kama Sutra, where they explore this a little bit. And it's actually done this was written by one of the associates with Tom Adams, which is one of the main heads in PCG, I would say, today. It's related with how personalities evolve in his game Dwarf Fortress. There is also a short video link there. It's quite interesting. And I wanted to talk a bit about my own work. I'm going to say this in Spanish. Decide Madrid is a platform for democratic participation. It was initially created by the city of Madrid. That was my previous job before joining COM. And it's a place where there is top-down democracy, where the city hall proposes something and the citizens vote. And it's also bottom-up. Citizens propose stuff and other citizens vote on them. So there are quite a lot of different kinds of data, like debates, proposals, budgets, proposals, and also lots of interactions between users, comments, lots of them, and votes, and different kinds of votes. So you can manage this complexity on the code side by making tests. But our designer hit a problem where he usually had to make a lot of effort in order to reproduce the situations that he wanted to see on the screen. Lots of, when you reach n number of nested comments, how do you present that? He would actually have to go create all the users, create comments, maybe validate the users before they can comment on stuff. So this was a huge investment in time. What we ended up doing was creating an algorithm which procedurally would simulate a set of users doing common actions in the application. We would call this a seed. And the seed would basically fill up the database in like 1 minute or so, and then our designer would just have to go inside and browse. And it was much faster. It was also easy to tweak. If you needed 1,000 comments instead of 100, it was just a matter of changing 1 0, and that's it. And then the machine took care of this. So it was actually a quite nice investment on time. And it was also quite enjoyable to program. I don't know why. I like this kind of creative stuff where you simulate people doing actions in your application. I think this particular part can be used in a lot of places, especially those where you expect lots of interactions, lots of individuals doing stuff. It's much better than doing by hand, hands down. So this is the file that you would have to look at. I'm not going to show it here. It's Ruby code, not Lua, but you can understand it quite easily. It's like sections of actions, like comment on comments, stuff like this. And I don't know how much time do we have left. Not much. Okay, so I'm going to present you what I did last week as part of a hackathon that we did in this office. People in COM usually did COM-related stuff, and my stuff was also COM-related, but it was a video game. So let me show it to you. Here we are. I don't know how loud the music will sound. Yeah, this is a video game. You can see it. It's quite loud. Can you maybe tell me what's happening here? Okay, so this is the video game I made in one day mostly. As you can see, there are like several sections. This one is a platform section. Down here we have some rocks that are actually destructible by the enemies, that are also procedurally generated, located procedurally. The objective is picking up those letters. Here. There are some more enemies on this side which try to kill you. And the funny thing is that the whole game is PCG. If you actually regenerate it, you get a new map with a different configuration. This is lava, by the way, it kills you instantly. It was one day of work. I had previous work already done, but it was quite challenging, and also preparing this made me not be able to prepare this talk as well as I wanted. So thank you very much. So that's all. I don't know if you have any questions. I'm not an expert on PCG, but I have played lots of games. So, okay. I have another demo that I can do if we have time.
No questions?
Okay, no questions. I'm going to show you. I have shown you like the very most basic PCG thing that you can do. What you saw were basically calls to math.random, and that's it. It wasn't done in Lua. Now I'm going to show you the other extreme of the universe of PCG. I'm going to show you Dwarf Fortress. Okay? So it's another game, not played by me. Yeah, it's a bit cheesy. The graphics are minimal. And why the hell I'm showing this arcane thing to you? Okay, so the first thing that you usually do in Dwarf Fortress is creating a world. Okay, to do that, it's calculating some stuff. Yeah, let me press S to continue because that's the obvious thing to do. Okay, now I have to choose the size. In order to make it quick, I'm going to choose smaller. And press Y, because that's obvious. Okay, so now the game is generating basically the equivalent of Middle Earth from Lord of the Rings. It's generating a bunch of hills, it applies geological rules to it, and then it adds some monsters like big dragons and stuff. They play the role of dinosaurs, maybe, and then it starts running the clock and simulating people, houses, villages, whatever you clans, whatever you want. When it's done, you have to enter to accept. Now it's saving the world, and you can start playing. The regular way you play in Dwarf Fortress is called Dwarf Fortress. But there are two other modes. The one I want to show you today, it's Legends. Legends should actually be called Encyclopedia, because what it shows you is basically the world that you have just generated. And I don't know if you can read it, but it says historical figures, 5,000. Science, 68 of 100. Artifacts, regions, underground regions, civilizations and other entities, structures, historical maps, and finally a chronological set of events that happen. So you can actually explore this and see people. Okay, for example, I'm going to see someone who's likely to have some family. These are all like legendary creatures. Okay, here's a female dwarf. This is the history of Misten Swashkis, which was a dwarf, and during her life, a lot of things happened. Like she, I don't know, she had a family. She fought in wars. She finally died, and it's really hard for me to show you the complexity behind this. I have to finish, but it's amazing, and it's a very arcane game, very difficult to play, learn to play, but it's also a generator of stories, real ones, and it's amazing. So give it a try if you can. And now, thank you very much for your time.
So now we have